your community office is about. And Sarah and Axel will go over the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists. And then at the end, we should have time for questions. Once we do this intro to organizations, we'll tell you all about the Polar Early Career World Summit, and we welcome engagement, questions, curiosity about the summit and maybe also what's next. So, the Polar Science Early Career Community Office, or PSECCO, as you've heard it called, is a national level organization hosted at the University of Colorado Boulder in the United States within CERES, an institute there, and the Center for Education, Engagement, and Evaluation. And it is funded by the National Science Foundation. The goal of the office is to focus on three main things: professional development opportunities, building community, and capacity building, and providing resources. So our mission is to empower and elevate early career scientists in the polar sciences, support vibrant community, provide opportunities and resources, offer skill trainings, and then work together as a community toward a more welcoming polar science environment for all. And I'm going to go through what does that mean in practice, but if you're interested in learning more throughout, you can find all of this information that I'll be giving you an overview of on our website, which is PSECCO.org. So, uh, PSECCO also operates as a connector and aims to be a connector of polar early career scientists to one another, polar early career scientists to polar early career organization partners, and to other early career organization partners. We aim to connect those organizations with one another where it's helpful to early career scientists, and then also to connect early career scientists with larger entities with early career opportunities. And along with this, I think what we've heard from the polar early career community over and over is that it's such a vast community and multidisciplinary community, and there's so much going on that often people struggle to understand the breadth of the community that they can get involved in. And so one of our goals is also to provide entry points for involvement and overviews of how folks can get involved in the organizations and plethora of resources that exist. So I'll walk through, as I said, how this looks in practice, but I'll note that beside each of my little headings, in this case, get connected, there will be a backslash, and join PSECCO community is an example of the rest of an URL you can put after PSECCO.org. So to get connected, and you can join our listserv, which connects with early career scientists. It connects early career scientists to opportunities. We also have a monthly newsletter that our partners share a lot of information in, and we share what's going on from the PSECCO side monthly. And we have a community Slack space that's ever growing and is a really great place where early career scientists are in communication and in community with one another. We also have lots of opportunities posted in that space too. And at any point, if you have questions beyond this presentation or through time, you can contact us at psecco@colorado.edu. You can also attend events that are facilitated by PSECCO, and you can find all of these at psecco.org/events. And we run a whole host of professional development workshops, webinars, panel discussions, events of different types that are designed in direct response to what we're hearing from early career scientists in what they need. So, for example, I mentioned that some early career scientists find it overwhelming to understand how to engage with the polar community. An example of how we tried to address that is by hosting one or two calls that introduce early career scientists to a whole host of organizations. I think we had like 16 organizations on one call, and we were still missing about 10. So we're doing our best to give overviews. We also host larger events like what you'll be hearing about in a little bit, the Polar Early Career World Summit. But one we hosted previously was the Polar Postdoc Leadership Workshop, which really activated the leadership skills of postdoc or people in postdoc adjacent career stage to understand the ways in which they could lead with the community, but then to connect with one another to determine what do they want to see the future of polar science as. We also, a kind of an emergent thing that came from the evolution of PSECCO over the last 4 years has been creating different resources in direct response to the demands of early career scientists. So that has looked like creating an ever-growing polar education resource repository where I've worked with undergraduate students to collate resources from the international polar community on lectures or lab resources in subject area expertise within the polar sciences that some people might not have access to, depending on where they're at, and what organization or university they're at, and whether or not they have polar specific educational resources. So that's ever growing. And I'll also just make a shout out slash note slash ask the community to share resources where you think there might be gaps in there. We have a lot of physical science material, and we're still growing our social science educational resource repository. We've also profiled in a sort of interview style feature on our website different scientists who are in careers outside of academia related to polar science, or they started in polar science and then transitioned to a different space because we were hearing from the early career community that they were really looking to see what they could do outside of the standard academic route. And we have early career research, early career researcher resources that kind of act similarly to the event I described before in featuring different organizations and how they can get involved. And they point to resources. For example, they point to APECS's really robust resource repository for early career researchers too. And then what came from the Polar Postdoc Leadership Workshop, amongst other things, was that cohort of about 20 postdocs thought, oh my gosh, we're getting this great mentorship and all of this insider knowledge on how we can thrive through time in the polar sciences. It doesn't seem fair that just we get this. So they did their best to kind of summarize the mentorship resources they had gotten throughout that event to share it with the broader community. And then finally, we have, you can engage with opportunities through PSECCO, be that through the professional development events I've mentioned before. We've also developed a partnership with Outdoor ProLink, and so folks based in the US can get gear discounts to lower that financial barrier to entry to doing fieldwork. And last but certainly not least, we're open to working with, collaborating with others in writing PSECCO into different proposals, especially as it relates to broader impacts, and trying to amplify and maybe bolster the impact that PSECCO can have through working with scientists to do more for the polar early career community. With that, I'll pass it to APECS.
Thanks. I can quickly pause if there are any questions about PSECCO directly to Mariama before I start with the APECS presentation. But I don't see any right away. But if you have any in the meantime, just note them down and we'll have more time later to discuss. I'm going to introduce APECS, the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists. And APECS is really an international organization for early career professionals of all disciplines with interests in the polar regions and the wider cryosphere, and professionals really in the widest sense. So all types of professions related to or with an interest in polar research are welcome within APECS. And Sarah and myself are working in the International Directorate, which is part of the support structure of our organization, kind of the backbone providing infrastructure and services to our members. And we are hosted in Northern Norway, in Tromsø, at UiT, the Arctic University of Norway, the Norwegian Polar Institute, and the Fram Center. Next slide, please. APECS does many different activities, and you'll see in a second that it's not the two of us doing all of that. But I'll try to give you yeah, a broad overview, and then we go into a bit of a detail for a few of them. But APECS as its core is a capacity building and community building organizations for early career professionals. So yeah, we care about career development, and especially similar to what PSECCO also does, we try to disseminate opportunities and resources, not only relevant, but specifically tailored to early career researchers in polar sciences. So we also send out a newsletter where we try to compile all the different opportunities from various organizations that provide you, yeah, engagement opportunities or initiatives to participate, information about travel funding for conferences. So everything you need to know that can support your career in polar research that we try to collect and both provide through our homepage, but also through our social media channels and our newsletter. As an organization, we advocate for, yeah, the inclusion of the perspectives of early career individuals and the wider community in research planning and policymaking processes. And one example of that is the Polar Early Career World Summit, which you'll hear more about later in this presentation. We do really value and try to create spaces for knowledge and experience sharing, but also for relationship building between individuals and also across disciplines. So that is quite an important aspect of our work, trying to bring people together and allow them to network, provide each other with, yeah, peer support and mentoring. And we do have some, yeah, specific activities that we run regularly, but many of these, yeah, aspects of our work are community driven. APECS is really can be a home for different activities that your community wants to run. So many of those have started as, yeah, ground up grassroots initiatives, and then were kind of institutionalized within APECS. And part of that is also that we, yeah, support education and outreach activities, which is a relevant aspect of many of the work that our national committees are doing. Next slide. What are our national committees? They are groups of members, and at the moment we have 32. And all over the world, we have around 6,000. We're almost there yet. So maybe if some of you sign up today, if you're not yet, then we might break the 6,000 member barrier today, but we're close to that. Our members are spread over all over the world, and when there is a national group that has some structure that they, yeah, self-govern and run activities for regional audiences with, then you're part of a national committee, but all of these members are part of APECS as the international umbrella of all these national committees. You can become a member of APECS by registering at www.apex.is. That's our website where you also can find more information about our activities, find news that is included in our newsletter, and can access resources as well. Just go back for a second, please. Membership is free, and if you are in a country where there is no national committee yet, you can find some peers. And as you can see from the map in the background, there are likely to already be other early career individuals that you can team up with and build a national committee. So where we don't have one yet, we are really keen to extend our structure into these regions and provide more localized activities there as well. Now, next slide. And that is one part of how you can engage with APECS. And I really want to emphasize that we are a community-driven organization. So there are many different roles where you, in a, yeah, community service role, can participate in APECS and shape both how the organization works, but also what activities we run. So when we come later to ways how you can engage with yeah, polar research planning, being a part of APECS and participating in our structure is one of them. And that not only gives you, yeah, access to other connections and opportunities, but it really allows you to interact with all these research organizations and bring certain topics that you personally care about on the agenda of discussions where you want to see them. And I just briefly want to highlight that we operate on an annual cycle. And the next round of applications will start in May 2026. But there is actually some activities where you can join throughout the years, and that are the project groups. Next slide. So project groups are one way where in which APECS members can work together on a certain topic or initiative. And I'll just briefly show a few examples. Next slide. For all of these project groups that are running for the 2025-2026 cycle, you can register at our website. So if some of them sound interesting to you, please go there and sign up. And there are groups of mixed sizes, some smaller, some bigger. For example, Polar Times is a podcast that is produced by our members. You can see the Polar Plastics group. It's actually a group that was formed at the Polar Early Career World Summit and is now starting the work and also collaborating with the SCAR group that works on plastic as well. So you see, these groups can serve as an entry point for you if you want to get started with APECS. Next slide. And for more information, I would just encourage you to go to our website or ask any questions then either now, or we'll also have more time later in the presentation. Okay, then I'll move on and introduce as the context in which the Polar Early Career World Summit happened, which is the International Polar Year 2032-2033. And for APECS, this is particularly exciting because these international polar years, for those of you that have not heard much or don't know the background of them, are only happening, have only happened every 50 years, but then during the last, or since the last International Polar Year, which was in 2007, 2008, the community decided that another polar year is needed already earlier. So now the fifth International Polar Year will be in what is now 7 years. And you can see that it is not an activity that is only happening in those 2 years. But the idea is really that it creates momentum towards and then also sustains that momentum beyond these years. So while 2032 may sound like a long time in the future, the planning for this has already started now, and you maybe have over the past few years more frequently heard or read about the International Polar Year, the IPY, and we are really keen to get more community members engaged in the planning process. Because what the Polar Year is really a community initiative. So the more individuals we can bring together who can collaborate in that context, the more successful that IPY can be. And you see that, for example, it is related to some UN decades and actions that, for some of which culminate then in the IPY, but that also, I think it is already in this version of the figure, yes, that, for example, initiatives like Antarctica in Sync. So all these large-scale planning processes that you might have heard of and might have asked yourself, what are these actually and how can I engage with them? They try to create opportunities to coordinate across the community. And that is what the IPY is about. Next slide. And to make this a bit easier to understand what the IPY is and how it works and how you can engage, I'm just briefly going to give you an overview over the structure. It is there is an executive committee, which is the highest steering body at the moment, which is composed of IAS, the International Arctic Science Committee, SCAR, the International Science Council, ISC, and the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. And these four organizations really carry forward the planning, but they also rely on all the other organizations that are involved with polar research. So there is a broader planning group that includes many, many different polar organizations, as many as I can't list them now here. And I realize we haven't added the URL, but you can go to ipy5.net, I think, to find out more about the IPY. And then within the planning group, task groups have been set up to focus on preparing certain aspects of the planning. And they are supported by an IPY secretariat, which at the moment is just an interim secretariat, but there will be a secretariat established soon. So the process for that is currently ongoing. Next slide. Um, and now to maybe you ask yourself how you can get involved. And these are only like two examples. Others we will show you later. But quite recently, a call for national committees within the international year structure has been published. As well, as it was announced that the IPY project endorsement will start in 2026. And especially, yeah, those of you that are early career researchers, but also everyone else, we really encourage to follow the national developments around the IPY and to engage with them actively. That will happen at different paces and yeah, with like different levels of activities in the different countries. But as I said earlier, this is a community-driven initiative. So if you do not see an IPY national committee being established and there are maybe fewer opportunities to engage that and you would like to see more, you can always talk to the relevant bodies within your country and encourage them to participate and contribute to this process. Next slide. There will and are also other opportunities to get involved as individuals, some of which will be through APECS, but that is definitely not an exclusive list. So there will be many more activities as the general ramp up phase happens within the next few years. And we are participating in that planning group. But more importantly, we are co-leading one of the task groups, and that is the task group on capacity building and early career coordination. APECS is co-leading that together with UArctic. And we have some events lined up where you will be able, as an individual, to give input to the work that we do there. And it is quite important for us that this will not be the only way for early career individuals to engage with the IPY. But the task that this group was assigned is really to develop a structure and develop priorities and requirements to be implemented throughout the IPY structure for meaningful ECR engagement and capacity building activities. So for that task group, but also in general, just another reminder that APECS is a grassroots organization and that we can work together to implement the structure and the activities that you want. So if you have any ideas, care about a certain aspect that you want to see implemented as a priority, really come to us, try to work with the organizations, also including SCAR and IASC that provide various opportunities to engage with these planning processes. And contribute your voice because these community initiatives can only work if we have individuals that make their voices heard. So that is a quite important point. And before we come back to how you can contribute to the planning in the future, we wanted to give you a short or an overview over the Polar Early Career World Summit, the PECCS, that we organized last year as an example of one such activity and also share the learnings and outcomes. And for that, I'll hand it back to Mariama.
Thanks, Axel. So we'll be diving now into PECWIS, the Polar Early Career World Summit, and we're going to start high level, noting that, of course, PSECCO and APECS hosted this. Um, and as Inga said, it was hosted alongside of Arctic Science Summit Week in the spring. It was hosted in person alongside of that, but then we had multiple opportunities for engagement from folks who weren't able to attend that in person, acknowledging that that was a barrier for participation. And we'll show you a lot more about how that looked in a second. But we want to just give a big shout out to the other organizations involved in supporting the summit, be that through being involved in review processes or critically financially supporting the summit, which are the organizations at the bottom. And you'll note SCAR was an active supporter of it as well. And we thank SCAR for that because you were able to help make this really big event happen. So at the in-person summit, we went into this with three main goals. The first being to shape polar research priorities and the next IPY and long-term research planning processes, including the ICARP, International Conference on Arctic Research Planning process that was happening, the summit for which was happening at ASSW that year. We also had the aim to strengthen polar early career networks and connections through that in-person time together, and then working on the broader products that came from this. And then finally, amplifying voices of the polar early career community, which is really the stage of the goal that we're working towards now, the stage of the goals that we're working toward now. So we had 238 total contributors, and that includes folks who informed what conversations were going to be happening at the Polar Early Career World Summit in Boulder, and then folks on the other end of it who attended the multiple online events that we hosted on different time zones. The in-person summit happened over 3 days, but I'd say the overall engagement process lasted from August of 2024 through May of 2025. We hosted 8 priority sessions at the in-person summit. There were 12 workshops, participant-led, and 3 cultural and social activities, which really were enriching, and 36 travel grants were distributed to support folks in traveling to the Polar Early Career World Summit. And as I noted, there were those 3 online events for engagement after the summit as well. And I'll go now into the main product and process that the Polar Early Career World Summit was based around, and that was synthesizing priorities from the early career community. So I've alluded to this engagement that happened ahead of the summit and after. We began gathering input from the broader community, which happened ahead of that in-person summit and informed the theme group selection of conversations that would happen at the summit. There was brainstorming at the summit where participants shared their ideas and perspectives that were in alignment with theme group topics, and then worked towards first drafts of like those priorities and what the early career community wants the international polar community to focus on in these IPY discussions. Then there was discussion. All participants were given the opportunity to provide input on other topics, and groups refined their drafts after they got input from folks at the summit. And then there was a synthesis process where theme groups synthesized the conversations that happened outside of the World Summit in that online asynchronous input format, and then from this discussion part of the process. And then they finalized their statements on their vision for the priority theme group, and then which ideally would inform the future of polar research. And then participants shared their theme group priorities with other attendees at the summit. And then from there, the PSECCO and APECS teams shared out the outputs from that summit in that online input format. So I'm giving you a time to glance at, but we're not going to go through all of these. The priority theme groups that informed the discussions that had happened at the Polar Early Career World Summit. So you'll notice that they have a wide range, one of which was developing open science principles into practices. Another was effectively communicating science and engaging the public, broadening the definition of science. So they really were broad in the discussions that happened. And from all of those discussions, the Early Career World Summit attendees developed 12 visions that were in alignment with those theme group discussions, 75 supporting priorities that they thought needed to be addressed to really meet the vision or accomplish the vision. And then they tried to make these visions tangible through sharing reasonings for why these priorities needed to be focused on, and then tangible actions that could be taken to get there. And that's a lot. So there's a lot here. A lot came from the in-person summit itself. And after we got online engagement in what came from the summit, the Polar Early Career World Summit, there were four of us who were editors from the PSECCO and APECS teams who tried to pull from that 6 cross-cutting themes of focus from the early career community. And I'll be going through that now. So one of them was funding system transformation. And I'm going to note that I should have maybe noted here that each of the 6 cross-cutting themes, what that means is that the themes that I'll walk you through showed up in, I want to say, at least 5 different of different parts of this process. So in 5 different of the 12 visions that were developed. So the first was funding system transformation. And what I'll do is as I walk through these, I'll give you examples that came from the PECWIS synthesis report around how that could look. I want to make a note here that some of these are big goals, but I highly recommend folks engage with the PECWIS synthesis report because it really goes into how that could tangibly look, even if funding system transformation sounds like a big goal, and it is, and it will take work. But some examples of how that might look are funding cycles that support relationship building, reduce barriers to international collaboration, and eliminate unpaid labor. Reduce institutional gatekeeping in research processes and enable direct community funding mechanisms. Another is honoring multiple ways of knowing and doing. And to do that, the PECWIS synthesis report calls for implementing decolonial methodologies, promoting indigenous and traditional ecological knowledge, and ensuring that data sovereignty principles protect community knowledge systems. Community-centered research practices. This one showed up in a lot of the 12 visions. That could look like ensuring community input from conception to completion, implementing trauma-informed practices, and supporting Indigenous data sovereignty. Open and accessible science. Data are ideally standardized, readily accessible, interoperable, and simultaneously uphold Indigenous data sovereignty where relevant. Ensure that open science practices do not perpetuate extractive research relationships. Effectively communicate science. This could look like training scientists as effective communicators and having that be like a critical part of an education. Establishing clear communication pathways amongst researchers, policymakers, and communities, and incorporate community feedback as a key part of the research process. And the 6th cross-cutting priority is ensuring safety and well-being. This could look like implementing trauma-informed practices, addressing systemic barriers and harassment, and providing culturally appropriate support systems and safety considerations in all stages and places of research. And I want to take a moment to pause and note that community engagement has been called out a lot here, and certainly that applies to the Arctic, but it also applies to the communities, the gateway communities to the Antarctic, and the communities that are most impacted by changes in the Antarctic as well. So maybe a final note related to cross-cutting priorities is we wanted to call out that science is a holistic process and encompasses more than addressing just research questions, which is, critically what a lot of IPY5 conversations um, center around, but the early career community is calling for the entire polar community to do science in a more equitable and sustainable way in years to come, and is really calling for the international polar community to think about how we do research right alongside of like what we're researching. And with that, I think I'll note that we had so many contributors, and we want to give a big thank you to those contributors. And I think I'm passing it off now uh, to Sarah.
Yes, thanks, Mariama. Yes, and exactly as Mariama was just highlighting, and also highlighted earlier in the presentation, that this was really a process, and we had this physical summit, but there were so many other events and contributors contributing to things that were not just the summit itself, but also its planning and the other activities. And so all the contributors that are you cannot read, but are the tiny names on the right-hand side here. Yeah, are really important to note. And there were so many of them, and that's something that we're so proud about this process, was just really that we were able to engage so many folks from around the world. And you can see there that there's a link, a URL you can find on the website, the document itself, and also the entry online on Zenodo where we've published it. So then I will move a bit for the rest of the presentation into some follow-up from the summit and kind of what comes next and continued engagement going forward. And that's hopefully especially interesting to those of you that maybe weren't at the summit or are hearing about this for the first time, to know that it's not kind of over, that there's still a lot of ways we're bringing this work forward. So to start, I just wanted to quickly recap what we heard back from those that were actually present at the summit. And we were really, really happy that when we asked participants we asked participants to reflect on kind of what words they would describe PECWIS with. And then when we collected all those responses, the three words that appeared the most times or were mentioned the most times were engaging, inspiring, and empowering, which was really, really wonderful to see, because those were definitely things we wanted to achieve. And I think I would especially highlight the empowering, in that we really do want to empower the early career community. And I think also people that aren't in the early career community, so senior scientists and many other organizations, they also want to see this, and that many organizations want early careers to kind of step up and take charge and make sure they are saying what they want to see. So this is really, really wonderful, and we hope to continue to empower people. And I've added a nice quote there on the side of the slide, but I'll just highlight a part of it instead of reading the whole thing. But I'm going to draw from the middle. It created a network of super passionate and keen ECRs who are committed to long-term involvement in polar research initiatives. It hugely inspired me and made me realize that the polar research space is a community I love and hope I can continue being a part of going forward. It made me feel empowered that we do, as ECRs, have a voice. And I think that's such a wonderful point, that there is really this important ECR voice, and especially when we're thinking about initiatives like IPY, which you heard of at the beginning. These are really long-term processes, and so the people that are, or the ECRs who are providing ideas now, are going to be many people leading these projects later. So now coming back to the synthesis report, we have designed a process where people can endorse the report, because we want to show that although we have many contributors, over 200 as you saw, that's still a pretty small fraction of like the overall early career polar community or polar community in general. So we have this endorsement option where people can endorse the report, just indicating that you support and agree with what these recommendations are that are in the report, so that we can, when we're presenting it, not only show that it had all these contributors, but also all these other people really sign on to what's in there. So feel free to scan this QR code, or also, again, the link is repeated for the synthesis report. on the website and you can endorse it. And then another thing that I also want to highlight is simply just take a look through it, read through what is recommended, and also use that chance to try to implement it in your own work. And that kind of goes for anyone at any career stage. I think there's some really great ideas in there. And as Mariama was describing in the process of the cross-cutting, since there were so many people involved and we kind of went through this distilling process, what ended up in the report is really, not just the idea of one person, but like were ideas that were shared by many, many people and have a lot of weight behind them. So I'd really encourage everyone to take a look and see what you can already implement in your own work. Because as Mariama also highlighted, some things of the goals are very big and will take a long time and attack from many angles, but others are some things that you can do on a more smaller scale in your own research project or field work. So definitely take a look and keep that in mind. So, what's next? As you've heard about, we had the summit, and now I just talked a bit more about the synthesis report. But going forward this year, we're going to have some follow-up events that are drawing on many of the same themes and processes, but then kind of continually adding new information and engaging new people. So there'll be a workshop at the Click Open Science Conference next month in Wellington, New Zealand, if anyone's going to be there. And this is also a really lovely example of none of us three presenters today will be physically at the Click conference, but one of our participants from the physical summit will be there, and she took on a leadership role and wanted to both present about PECWIS at this Click OSC as well as host a workshop. So we're really grateful that our participants, were really inspired by PECWIS and are helping us carry forward the work. Then in March, we also will have a workshop at the Arctic Science Summit Week, which will be in Aarhus in Denmark this year. I know many of you maybe are only operating in the Antarctic space, so maybe won't be there, but maybe some of you are polar and will be there. And then also there will of course be the SCAR Open Science Conference in Oslo in August, and we plan for a workshop there as well. And when I say, I just keep saying workshop, but it basically, when we're holding these workshops or events, we're really trying to engage people and use some of these like same questions and processes for PECWIS to keep getting new input, to keep collating and bringing forward for these larger scale research processes. And then the last point there on the side says your ideas, which is because this is kind of dynamic. It's not that we've already laid out, these are the only places where we will engage. And of course, now this was a bit of a snapshot of what's happening kind of in the first half of this year, but there's plenty of time after that. So definitely to anyone listening that likes to also organize or attend events, feel free to reach out to us if you think there's a really obvious venue where we should be gathering early careers, because we're really happy to hear that and consider what we can do. So, as I mentioned, these two, but I just want to highlight them again since I think they're probably of great interest to many of you listening today, or you're planning to attend these conferences anyway. So just like make the note that there will be workshops at these conferences. Yeah, we already can give the time for the one at the SCAR OSC. That's going to be on the 9th of February, 11 to 3 local time. And the one that will be held at the Open Science Conference in Oslo is still to be set in terms of the exact schedule. So just keep an eye out for that. But we hope to see you there or at a different event. Now I'm going to round out by talking both about IPY again, but also Antarctica in Sync, which we haven't talked about yet. But the work that we're doing with PECWIS and priority setting in the polar research space is also very tied to these initiatives, which are very big long-term initiatives. So first to say a little bit about Antarctica in Sync, if you don't know what it is yet. It's a UNESCO-endorsed Ocean Decade program for synchronous international collaborative scientific observations in Antarctica and the Southern Ocean. So a big coordinated research effort in Antarctica and the Southern Ocean. And right now is the preparatory phase. And then starting from next year will be the observation phase. So when there's actually field campaigns going on. And those will continue through around 2030, when then it will be a synthesis and reporting phase with it kind of culminating in the IPY 2032, 2033. And the really exciting thing for those of you listening in ECRs with Antarctica InSync is that there's this national committee structure. So many countries have national committees. I put the website URL there in the corner of the slide. And if you go on the website to the tab or navigate to partners and then to national committees, then you can easily see what national committees already exist. And within those national committees, some of them have APECS representatives, and I expect many more to be added. So we really encourage those of you who are listening to like check out the who's already listed on the national committee for your country. Maybe you know some of them, or you could reach out to the contact. Each national committee has a general contact person. And if you don't see an APECS representative already, then maybe you can be a part of trying to get them added. And of course, if APECS has a national committee in your country, then that should be coordinated with them. But we really encourage that, that we get these positions in order and get as many early careers involved in the Antarctica InSync national committees. And similarly for IPY, the organization and the structure of IPY is very much, or the IPY Secretariat is very much still taking shape. And there will also be a national committee structure. Some countries are already more formalized in this than others. It's happening at a bit different timescales depending on the country. But we also encourage everyone to just keep an eye out for what's going on where you are based, because there are also likely to be opportunities through the national committees in the IPY structure. But we also expect there to be thematic opportunities. Those may be developing a bit later as the IPY planning becomes more concrete in terms of like what projects and activities and initiatives are all going to be in the IPY umbrella. And definitely something that we are advocating for is having early career positions in as many aspects as possible, or virtually every aspect, actually. And Axel mentioned in the beginning when he was presenting about IPY that there's this current IPY Task Group 4 on where we're kind of creating the framework and providing recommendations for how early career should be involved in the International Polar Year. And a big part of that is just figuring out like what structural aspects can we recommend to make sure that people are supported and really involved in as many steps as possible. So that's just another call to keep your eyes out, and we expect opportunities kind of on many different levels and with different organizations coming forward with the IPY. And now we come to the end of the presentation. Just ask everyone to sit for a second, absorb. It was probably a lot of information, and we really welcome any questions, comments, reflections, really anything you might want to say is very welcome. And thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you. Also from my side, it was actually really interesting, and I liked the part of the Arctic Science Summit Week because I was one of the persons who was also online participating, not really online, but I had a recorded talk that was shown. And I saw that there were already a lots of, well, not really discussions, but information shared via the chat. And I think there might be some further questions here from the audience, because I see that there's also quite a lot of people who are not early career scientists, and maybe they would like to know how they can be actually involved, or I don't know, that is just a guess. Is there somebody who wants to say something or ask? Camilla.
Yes, thank you so much. I was about to write, but then it's easier that you open the mic for that. I have two questions, or first one comment. Really, thank you to all of you because it clarifies us how is the structure, and it really helped for that because I am familiar with the names of the organizations, but then when I want to get into, it's a bit like, okay, I don't know where, how, and what to do. So into that direction, the question that I have is regarding APECS particularly. I know that there are some APECS Chile, APECS Argentina, which are, for example, the two organizations that I'm working at the moment. So I'm Argentinian, stayed in Argentina, but working for a Chilean organization or a Chilean institution doing my postdoc. So in those cases, the question will be how to get involved. Like, is there any APEX global that then we can divide into tasks or activities, or what would you recommend into that direction if I want to get a little more involved?
I can hop in and answer that. So there, I guess the funny an part about the answer is that there's multiple ways. So it's not just kind of one pathway. You have a choice of a few pathways, or you could go with all of them, depending on how much time you have, of course. But one is the national committees themselves, and that's totally free. And like we do have many people that are from one country and work in another country, and actually some that then, because of that, are active in multiple national committees. Or maybe you just want to choose one, that's totally fine. And we don't, as the International Directorate, we don't directly manage how the national committees are like communicating with people. So it's a bit different. Some of them have active websites or active Instagrams, but just like a quick search, you should be able to find, or maybe you already know how your national committee is kind of organizing people. But actually, I should first back up and say that if you're not signed up as an APEX member, that's really step number one, of course. And then through that process, you'll at least get added to the mailing list of one national committee, and you can email us and ask to be on the mailing list of an additional one if you want. And then, so that's kind of one option, is to be involved in the national committee structures, and that's quite individual to each national committee. Many of them have leadership boards within the national committees and are organizing their own events. And then, as you also mentioned, then there's kind of this other aspect of the APEX structure where we have the project groups, for example, and that's like not at all kind of location based, so anyone can join those. You'll find more information about that on the APEX website. And then, as Axel also highlighted, then we have the kind of, yeah, overall structure, I guess you could say, where we have, for example, the executive committee, and that's open really to anyone to apply. Generally, some preference for people who have some experience in APEX from before, but there's always instructions about that when it's announced. And as Axel said, that comes in May. And then kind of throughout, like, I'm trying to keep this a bit succinct, but there's so much in the structure. But then there's also, of course, like the council, which then that draws from people that are involved both in the project groups and the national committees. Yeah, so I'll stop blabbing on now, but basically to say that yes, like national committees, I guess would be one answer, and then the other would be if you're interested, maybe especially in this type of work, like the really broad, high-level planning, then definitely keep an eye out for when there are a bit later in the year when we're announcing for the call for project leaders and the executive committee, for example, and then that's how you could get involved in that aspect of the structure.
Amazing, Sarah. Thank you very much. And thanks also for the link that I just saw on the chat. The last question will be regarding mostly into this effective science communication. If you have any idea where to look up for financial support into the framework of polar science communication, if you know about anything on that.
I can speak to one thing that's popping to my head, but I also feel like Sarah and Axel could speak to other initiatives. There is something in the US, but I think it's broadly open, called Polar STEAM, and they partner scientists with educators. I think there's I don't know if it's like there's not paid time to work on it, but they have financial support for like making the partnership happen to the best of my knowledge. I can share a link to that. But can anyone share about Polar Educators International? I don't think there's financial support there either. Sarah, Axel, do you have more info related to that?
Well, specifically related to Polar Educators International or PEI, I paused for a second because I know Inga also could speak on that. But this is another organization, an interest organization for polar educators. So any educator working with polar topics, kind of an educator in any sense. Definitely also many members being people that teach in classrooms with school age kids who want to include polar topics. And I think you're right, as you said, Mariama, there's not so many funding opportunities through there, but more rather a community of like-minded individuals who are interested in keeping up with kind of the what's going on and making sure there's good resources to use in educational settings.
Yes, that's
Great.
true. And
Thank you, guys.
well, I think they're always having their own problems with fundings, but it's, as you said, Sarah, it's a big group with also people who are working in museums and other educational organizations. So it's not only educators who are really going to schools themselves. There's another question or a comment from Maureen here in the chat, and maybe you want to speak up because she says she's not an early career researcher, but she is an early career researcher in the field of polar science. So maybe Maureen, you can speak.
Yes, no, thank you very much. And I appreciate the time and the offer. And yeah, exactly as you said, I am embarking on a PhD looking at Arctic, actually tourism in Arctic islands, but I'm not an early career researcher. Well, I'm not early career because I've done all this other work, but I'm an early career researcher, and I'm quite interested in the link between the early career researchers and established science, and also in science communication. So any information on that, any information on Arctic research, particularly from the UK point of view, I would be very grateful for. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I can immediately hop in and say that something that we really love about the APECS network is that it's like self-defining. So if you identify as early career in some way, you are welcome. So totally fine that you've already had had a pathway before this. And I think many of the APECS resources are definitely still useful to you. So if it sounded useful and interesting and you're not already an APECS member, then of course sign up. And I think that's kind of one of the first points of contact that a lot of people have with us is just signing up and then starting to receive our monthly newsletter, and then you'll get an impression of like what's going on. And someone already dropped in the chat the link for UKPN, the UK Polar Network, which is APECS's UK chapter. And they're one of the bigger and like more active chapters. So there's a lot going on with UKPN. And they, I think, generally at especially meetings that would be happening like locally somewhere in the UK would often organize a social or some other event or something. So that's good to keep an eye out for. Yeah, so I think that those would be like the easiest avenues is definitely just sign up as an APECS member and then keep an eye out for what UKPN is organizing where you are.
Many thanks for that. I appreciate your time and all that information. Well done.
I'm gonna jump in here also and just say that through the years, like in the past 5 years, I want to say I've seen at least two like not associated with a conference science communication workshops kind of come out of just people organizing. So US APECS organized one, I want to say in 2017, just by applying for funding from the National Science Foundation. There's another one in the US in 2019, but there are often workshops associated with conferences, polar conferences that pop up. They're not necessarily ongoing initiatives beyond that workshop, but I would just encourage people to keep an eye out for stuff like that or help create them that if you're not finding those resources. I also just wanted to call out one distinguishing thing that often comes up, or distinguishing note that comes up as a question often related to what's the difference between PSECCO and APECS. And I think we've described that at the start of the presentation, but I want to note that PSECCO has resources and this like online Slack community, as I mentioned, Slack community, and then a newsletter, but we've purposely not created like a way to volunteer with PSECCO because APECS has this phenomenal structure. That said, we have synergy and we work together on various initiatives. So PSECCO is available to anyone internationally unless there's funding involved because it's a US funded organization, i.e. you can't apply for funding from PSECCO if you're not based in the US, but other things are open internationally.
Yeah, Owen, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a couple of points that have been made. One on the education side and how to get involved there. One of the links that we put in the chat there was to the Polar Resource Book, and that was interestingly an output from IPY4, so the previous IPY, where Polar Educators International was actually brought together and started. So we're at a really good point now in IPY5 where we're still gathering input so people can get involved and kind of help with the steering what you want from education in the polar context from IPY5 and start thinking about it. One of the places that we will be thinking about legacies of IPY5 and what it could do that won't happen sort of without IPY happening is going to be at the Polar Symposium in Monaco at the end of February. And I think the summary report from the World Summit is going to be really good material to use within that context as well, because we're looking at things like what way funding needs to change to reflect what's going to actually be useful for the community going forward and how we can use IPY to drive some of that. So there's really good places that we can take the outputs from the World Summit and really make a difference. One other place is that SCAR will update its horizon scan this year. And so as an exercise in looking at the priorities from the early career perspective, that'll be really good material to be used as part of what we bring together to update the horizon scan. That should be completed by the end of this year and will be very useful, again, in terms of what we feed into IPY, but just directly into the way that SCAR works as well. And speaking specifically to that, if science communication is something that we should be looking at and providing, then this series is one of the things that we should provide it through. So we can use that as a topic to target for one of the later iterations of SCAR Connect. Thanks.
Thanks, Owen, also for this information. Oh,
People can still ask questions, but we had this one more cute slide, so I thought I'd share.
so this was very important to show. Wow, fantastic. Yeah, are there any more questions now for our three experts? I don't think so. So then I will just maybe close this up and thank you once again, Mariama, Sarah, and Axel for this, Alex for this presentation. And we will also then upload this webinar on the website, on the SCAR web page, where also the last webinar will is already available. And I hope we will announce in short time the next webinar. We are definitely aiming for at least one from now until the Open Science Conference. And yeah, then thanks again for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.